All right, let's dive into a book that was, and I'm not exaggerating, an absolute sensation nearly 250 years ago. This was a story so emotionally powerful that it just exploded across Europe, creating this incredible wake of obsession, new fashion trends, and yeah, a whole lot of controversy.
So, can a book kill? It's a pretty intense question, I know, but it's a question people were seriously asking after Johann Wolfgang von Goethe published The Sorrows of Young Werther. You see, this novel wasn't just a bestseller. For some people, it was seen as something truly dangerous.
Way before we had TikTok or anything going viral on the internet, this book created a legitimate cultural firestorm. It was one of the first, most explosive examples of how a single piece of media could just grab hold of millions of people and create a phenomenon they started calling Werther fever.
And the impact was just massive. I mean, people didn't just read this book, they lived it. It was an instant international bestseller for starters. Then, a full-on fashion craze took off, with young men all over Europe dressing up like the main character in this very specific blue coat and yellow vest. The book was everywhere, sparking these huge philosophical debates. But it also had this much darker side. It became tragically linked to a very real way of copycat suicides. So you've got to be wondering, who is this character that caused such a massive stir? Well, the whole novel is told through letters written by our hero, a young, super sensitive artist named Werther. He's a guy who feels everything, I mean everything, to the absolute extreme. He isn't guided by rules or logic, but by the sheer force of his own heart. And this one quote from Werther himself, it tells you everything you need to know. He doesn't try to manage his emotions, he leans into them hard. He says he treats his heart like a sick child whose every little whim has to be satisfied. And that whole perspective, that his feelings must be obeyed at all costs, is what sends him on a tragic collision course with the real world. The actual plot starts out simply enough. Werther, our artist, escapes the city for the peaceful countryside, looking for some inspiration. And there, he meets Charlotte, a kind, beautiful young woman, and he falls for her instantly. And for Werther, this isn't just some little crush. It's a life-changing, all-consuming love at first sight. But, of course, there's a catch. There's one big, impossible problem that drives the entire story. Charlotte, the object of his perfect, incredible love, is already engaged to somebody else, a respectable, dependable guy named Albert. And this setup is just classic, right? Werther and Albert could not be more different. Werther is all about pure, unchecked passion and emotion. He is the heart. Albert, on the other hand, he represents reason, stability, society's rules. He is the head. So Werther's the kind of guy Charlotte might dream about, but Albert is the guy she's supposed to marry. But, this story is so much more than just a sad little love triangle. It's really a kind of manifesto for a whole new way of thinking and feeling that was just starting to emerge in Europe at the time. Goethe uses Werther's journey to explore some really revolutionary ideas. He's making a case for the power of individual emotion over the cold, hard logic that was so popular back then. He uses nature as this perfect mirror for Werther's soul. It's bright and beautiful when he's happy, but dark and stormy when he's in despair. Really, at its core, the book is about this epic clash between a sensitive soul and a rigid world, and it's a pretty stark warning about where unchecked passion can lead. This quote really just gets to the heart of Werther's tragedy. The very thing that gives him these moments of pure, unbelievable joy, his ability to feel so deeply, is the exact same thing that causes him such unbearable pain. His greatest strength is also his fatal flaw. In fact, this novel pretty much became the poster child for an entire artistic movement called Sturm und Drang, which translates to storm and stress. You can think of it as a kind of youth rebellion, pushing back against the old, rigid rules, and just celebrating raw, untamed human emotion. And Werther, he was their icon. So all of this brings us to the big debate about the book, both back then and still today. Is it this revolutionary work of psychological genius, or is it a reckless, dangerous glamorization of despair? Let's break down both sides. Okay, let's look at this. On one hand, you've got its strengths.
It's considered one of the very first deeply psychological novels. It captures intense emotion in a way that feels so real it's almost uncomfortable, and the writing style was completely new for its time. But then you have the dangers. Critics argue that the hero's extreme self-pity can get pretty old pretty fast. And more seriously, they say the novel romanticizes suicide, really blurring the line between passionate feelings and what might be a serious illness.
What's fascinating is that this exact debate plays out right inside the novel itself. It happens in this really powerful conversation between our emotional hero, Werther, and the rational Albert. It's a total clash of worldviews. So first, you have Albert. He takes the conventional, logical position. He basically argues that real strength is about enduring suffering, and that taking your own life is the easy way out. It's just giving up. But Werther fires back with this deeply personal, emotional defense. He argues that people have limits. For him, it's not about being strong or weak. The real question is whether a person's suffering has become more than they can possibly bear. It was a radical idea that put individual experience above what society thought was right or wrong. So, why does this story still hit a nerve? Well, despite all the controversy, the book's influence on art and culture has been just massive, and it's lasted for centuries. I mean, you can literally trace a line through history. It's published in 1774, and by the end of the century, it helps kickstart the entire Romantic movement. Then, in the 1800s, this character type evolves into the Byronic hero. You know, those brooding, moody guys like Mr. Rochester or Heathcliff. And even today, that popular trope of the misunderstood, tortured artist, it owes a huge debt to young Werther. So in the end, yeah, it's a story of unrequited love. But its real, lasting legacy was giving the world a brand new kind of hero, one who wasn't defined by his great deeds, but by the incredible depth and intensity of his inner life. Which kind of leaves us with the big question, right? How should we look at Werther today? Is he a timeless, tragic hero? A martyr for individualism and deep feeling? Or is he a cautionary tale about the dangers of self-obsession? You know, maybe he's a little bit of both.
I am genuinely curious to know what you think. Is this a book you'd ever want to read? Is Werther a character you can sympathize with? Or is he just frustrating? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today.